All right. So this is the second part of the review. We start with GDP, or measuring national income of a country. All right. Here, the things we discussed was we didn't try to analyze GDP, where it comes from, and how it can be increased or decreased, but we were just trying to understand some concepts and notions of GDP. So one thing is to know what GDP is, its definition, um, know the definition, and be able to use those phrases in the definition to tell what GDP includes and excludes. Uh, Now, even though GDP tries to include all transactions, uh, not all transactions are included. Um, there are transactions that involve second-hand goods, old goods produced, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we have to exclude those things. Um, the other very important result is that GDP measures three things at the same time. That is the value of the goods produced, the income generated when the goods were produced, and the expenditure made on those goods and services. And therefore, GDP is all these things at the same time. Yeah, the other thing we discussed is the difference between GDP and GNP, and we said that GNP, which is gross national product, is GDP. To GDP, add the net factor payment from abroad, and this net factor payment is the difference between what, for example, in the case of US, what US citizens earn abroad. Well, not just citizens, but factors of production earn abroad. To that one, you have to subtract what foreigners earn in the US. Okay, that's the idea in here. And a couple of questions here are asked by saying that if somebody earns income in the United States and if it's not American, where does it go? Well, not to the US GNP, but to the US GDP, because GDP includes everything that is produced within the borders of a country, right? Then we talked about household production. Household production, that is production for your own consumption, like tomato from your garden, for example, backyard garden, is not considered in the GDP because it's not a market activity. There is no transaction involved with somebody else when you consume them. But there are some items that are home production that are included in the GDP, and that is there is actually one single item, that is imputed rent. That is the estimated benefit in terms of dollars that you get from your own house in staying in your own house goes to GDP. So if there is a rented apartment for $1,000 in your neighborhood, that of course goes to GDP because this is something like the market activity in which somebody is selling a service to somebody else. But if you are staying in your own house, but that house could have been rented for $1,000, then this $1,000 again goes to GDP, even though it is something like home production. That $1,000 is called imputed rent. Well, That's the only home production that goes to GDP. Then, if GDP is three things at the same time, we can measure GDP in three ways. That is from value-added approach, income approach, and expenditure approach. All right. And we focused on the expenditure approach because we are going to use it for studying behavior. Who is buying our goods and services? Is it households, which goes to consumption? And is it firms, which goes to investment? Is it government, which is G? This is domestic government, not foreign government. And then net exports, which is exports minus imports. So exports are included because they are our own goods or they are domestic goods, but bought by foreigners. But we subtract imports because the C plus I plus G include also imports, so we have to purge them out, and therefore that's included. Now, of course, everything that is spent by households goes to consumption, except one thing, that is the purchase of a new house, which goes to investment. So there is one activity in investment that is done by households, basically. The other stuff is done by firms. So sometimes we abbreviate this by net exports, but it's all the same. Now you have to understand that this is the GDP or income of the nation, and this equality always holds because it's a definition. So whenever one item increases in here, another item must decrease, or the GDP must increase as well. So this thing must be maintained. We have done some exercise on this one, and you have to remember that. Then finally, we talked about the limitations of GDP, 4 limitations of GDP. And yeah, those are the things also you have to remember. All right, let me go now to the CPI. CPI, or in general, the price level, measuring the price level, and then from there, the inflation. Well, here you have to remember how we calculate the CPI. CPI basically the ratio of two numbers or cost of a basket. So it's the cost of basket in current or given current prices, or using current prices, and cost of basket using base year prices. Basically it's a ratio, it's not in percentage, but we multiply it by 100 just to change it from some decimal to something close to 100 or above 100. Yeah, now once you calculate the CPI of, let's say, 2024, that's gonna be the current price will be 2024 prices, but here we include some base year price, let's say 2010. All right, that's what we basically do. Then we do the same for CPI of, let's say, 2023. Then by calculating the percentage change, inflation is basically the percentage change in CPI between 2 years, in CPI between 2024 and 2023. Yeah, so that's the idea in here. And then we discussed the limitations of CPI, basically by fixing the basket of goods just at the same basket. It creates a problem of overstating inflation when prices go up, and maybe understating deflation when the CPI also goes down. And then we looked at other types of price indices, like the GDP deflator and production possibility, PPI, that is producer price index. And yeah, the only difference is that the basket of goods they use. Otherwise, the formula is very similar. You are dividing two sets of cost of a basket. GDP deflator uses the total GDP of an economy as a basket. The producer price index uses those goods and services used by a typical producer, like coal, electricity, and so on. Right? So when the price of a good goes up, CPI and GDP may change in different degrees, simply because that item may not be in both baskets. It can be sometimes only in CPI or only in GDP, but sometimes it's also in both. Yeah, those are the things. Then we what do we use CPI for? We use CPI for comparing the price of a good in different years. There is a formula that converts basically old prices into current prices. And then also we can use price index in order to convert nominal variables to real variables, like nominal GDP to real GDP, nominal real interest rate to real interest rate, and so on and so forth. I think I'll stop here for the review. I'll send you also some notes. Yeah, but video more than this is too much. I'll stop it. Thank you for tuning in.